Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we've finally got the offseason up and going here in 2040. Free agency filings happened earlier today, and as we think about the free agent market, we're going to take a couple of pretty significant hits to our fan interest when a couple of the top free agents on the market officially leave the Oakland A's organization. One is Chase Dora, who has been a member of our last three World Championship teams since we picked him up in a trade with Cincinnati midway through the 2036 season. Had a bit of an off year by his standards last year, didn't reach 10 wins and hit an ERA of over 4. He's also 32 years old at this point, but still has the profile of a pretty solid major league pitcher. Looking for 6 years at over $25.2 million a year, however, so probably not a realistic candidate for us to be thinking about. And then, of course, the other big free agent that's going to result in pretty significant hit to fan interest when he moves on is the franchise Jake Ortega, also a member of our last three World Championship teams, two-time MVP who's had an incredible career with us. At this point, extremely hard for us to reach back out and potentially sign him, and he's looking for 6 years at over $34 million a season. Given that he is 33 years old, wrecked physically, and although he still has very strong ratings, is definitely declining a bit at this point in his career. I think it was probably the right point to move on from him, walk through some contract offers we had given him in our last episode. In retrospect, with some of the money that we had picked up for this upcoming season via the trade market when we traded away some pitchers, I can kind of tell myself right now, boy, if I had offered Ortega maybe $25 million a year over 3 years with team options those final couple seasons, could I have gotten him signed knowing that it was really just a 1 year kick the can kind of deal and we'd be dealing with this again next offseason? And I think it's possible a deal like that would have gotten it done, and we had the money to make it work on the margins knowing it was really just a 1 year deal. But when I look at the fact that he had a under 4 WAR this past year, despite playing almost 150 games, and the fact that given that he's missed over 100 games in 2 of the last 4 years when I was still playing him in the outfield, even though he's capable of playing the outfield well at this point, I would have still had him locked into that DH role where we can't take advantage of his excellent defense. To me, it's not inconceivable that he could have put up a 5 WAR kind of season for us or whoever he signs for next year, even possibly only playing DH if he can get that batting average to get up from 264 back more towards the 300 mark that he's had over the course of his career. But even at a $25 million number, I don't know that there's really a ton of excess value for that in that contract. So I think it probably was still the right thing to move on from him, but would have loved a guy that we picked 3rd overall in the draft many years ago and has grown up through our farm system to have been a lifelong member of this fictional Oakland A's franchise. But unfortunately, that will not be the case. Have a couple spots to potentially fill in our outfield. We're going to have Selvey in left and Uresti in right again. And they were both players who actually got MVP votes last year, so feel real strong about left field and right field for next season. Center field is up for grabs, but Joe Harmon was on the major league team all last year. I think he's certainly a competent major league center fielder, more than competent defensively. The bat, kind of an average major league bat, quite honestly. But he could certainly handle the position for us in a pinch. But with the youngster Aguiar and the recent acquisition of Armstrong, as well as Steve McIlvain out there, feeling like we've got options to take over those final couple outfield spots that we're going to have up for grabs as we head into the 2041 season. And even pitching wise, with Dora leaving his spot in the rotation and the fact that we've moved on from our longtime stopper, Mr. Orozco, a really good reliever in Mr. Blanco, and then, of course, Gallic, who could start or relief that we picked up last year. You could say that there's some big holes in the pitching staff, but we've got 4 starters and 7 bullpen members that are sitting on the major league roster as we think about it. And guys like Camuñez and Arriola could easily pivot into the starting rotation. So we really only need to find a couple other pitchers. And when we look at our AAA team, there are plenty of options there. Danny Dakar, who was a first-round pick 6 years ago, is honestly at this point probably one of the less attractive options, but he could certainly hold down a middle relief or a 5th starter kind of role for us. Jesus Ramos, worry a little bit about his less than perfect control, but another guy who is a more than acceptable number 5 starter, who at 22 years old we hope might become more than that. Really did well so far with this 8th round pick from 2036, who's now the number 95 prospect in baseball. Nelson Delgado is older, former 17th round pick from 2035 out of Nova Southeastern University. Had some injury issues last year, but was pretty effective in AAA. Another guy is a middle reliever, long reliever, certainly could do worse than him. Chad Evans is a guy who's in our development lab. Real excited to see what this former 2nd round pick can do. We jumped him all the way from high A to AAA last year, and he was respectable at the AAA level. Got him in the dev lab, and hopefully he can add a little bit to his stamina, which would give him an opportunity to maybe even be in the mix as a potential starter. Eric Keach, another reliever, hits the triple digits on the radar gun, former 8th round pick who has developed into a really good looking relief prospect for us. And last but certainly not least, lefty and Wilson Rangel, 22 years old, IAFA signing, who's the number 67 prospect in baseball. Had a pretty good season in AAA last year, and I say pretty good is an understatement. 1.77 ERA, 11 strikeouts per 9 innings, and 24 saves for us as our closer. Think he could be contributing to the bullpen this year. So between the 5 youngish guys that we just talked about, feel we can definitely find 2 or 3 more guys to help our pitching staff, which is why we were willing to trade away some of those pitchers to clear some salary over the last few weeks. So those last few minutes were perhaps a long way of me saying I don't think we're going to be incredibly active in the free agent market this year. The international free agent class is pretty unattractive. Yun Ho Kim here, who is one of the top pitchers on the market, has been posted by Korea, so he's someone who could be interesting, but also going to be incredibly expensive. Think he can be a big-time player, but you can see looking for almost $30 million a year over 7 years, and he's already on the wrong side of 30. But between guys like Juan Alvarado, Steve Tudor, Eric Wingert, Dora, Kevin Mooney, Kevin Pilla, there are some pretty interesting guys who could certainly start for us, but don't feel like we need to go after pitchers. The one thing that we could conceivably look to do, even though I think we can piece together a starting center fielder in the last spot or two in our outfield, is continue looking at some of the center fielders that we thought about trading for when we got close to the trade deadline last off season. I think Walker Jenkins is kind of unlikely at this point. 35, soon to be 36 years old, wrecked physically. And although we're getting an updated scouting report on him, we've already got very high scouting accuracy, and his ratings look pretty average at this point. That being said, he's still definitely a force against right-handed pitching. So there is a scenario, I think, where if he lingers on the market and he's willing to come down in terms of his demands, could we revisit things with him a couple months down the line? Definitely could happen. But 5 years at $14.5 million a year, given his age and his injury proneness, not a move that we're looking to make. Kimani Ibekwe, also a left-handed hitting guy who can play center field. Love that he's durable and a little bit younger than Jenkins, and think that his bat is a little better at this point, although not as dramatic platoon splits for the likes of Ibekwe. The dollar amount a year he's looking for at $10.8 million is certainly something that could be tempting to me down the line. The issue is, though, he's looking for that $10.8 million over 6 years. If he were to come down in terms of what he's looking for in terms of the years, I could definitely see us engaging with him. I don't think as a guy to get into the mix as an outfielder who gives us solid speed, solid defense, a solid bat, durability, and another left-handed bat. I think Ibekwe could be interesting for me, but I'm not willing to even think about a 6-year contract for a player with his profile at this point. I think someone will give Ortega huge bucks given his resume and given his profile, but clearly if the franchise were to linger on the market for some reason and perhaps become a more reasonable signing for us, I won't rule it out. But my expectation is that Mr. Ortega and Dora will probably be off the market before the end of 2040. And not too much has been happening for us over the first week or so of free agency, but that's not really surprising since we haven't made an offer to any actual free agents. What we have seen is the young pitcher Luis Villarreal. You may remember he was the guy that we picked up when we traded away a couple of those pretty good major league pitchers that I talked about earlier, Mike Gallick and Daniel Blanco. And he's now viewed as the number 38 prospect in baseball. Got a lot of work to do to get to the majors. We're likely going to have him in high A ball or A ball to begin next year. Hopefully could promote him to high A down the line. As I noted when we picked him up, don't necessarily think he's going to be a superstar unless he truly reaches his full potential. Don't love that he doesn't throw incredibly hard, but he's got a lot of positive things going for him. I think he was a real interesting return for a couple of guys who, albeit very good major league pitchers, were also expensive for our roster in particular. But a lot of teams have been looking at Luis Villarreal since we picked him up. Certainly don't know that a guy like Alfredo Bernal is someone that we would trade for him. 17-year-old, suffering from shoulder inflammation, has the stamina to be a starter, and I do like his velocity, but he's got a lot of work, even more than Villarreal does, to become a major leaguer. Honestly, Bernal is probably one of the more interesting offers that we've gotten for Luis, but not a trade that I'm looking to make at this point. And the winter meetings are set to start tomorrow. Ortega supposedly engaging with the Mets. I wonder if in 2040 Steve Cohen is still the owner of the Mets. I would assume he probably is. Oh, Ben Cohen, who presumably I'm guessing is a either real or fictional son of Steve Cohen, is now the owner of the Mets. But they have plenty of money if they want to go after the franchise. So Boston is also interested in him, although the Red Sox actually just signed Walker Jenkins, $34.2 million. So he came down pretty significantly. He was looking for 6 years and I think 14.5 million a year. So he ended up being much more realistic than what he was saying to us in terms of what he was looking for. Given that we do have money to spend this year, and we could, at this point, tweak our scouting and development budgets down a bit if we wanted to, might be worthwhile at least checking in on Ibekwe. Again, I think he's a guy who could help us. His contract demand has come down a bit since we last checked in. Still says he's looking for 6 years, but he may have some flexibility on that given that his other center field running mate, Jenkins, signed for 2 fewer years than he had allegedly been asking for. Now, granted, Ibekwe is a little bit younger, but looks like he's had another negative personality trait that's kind of emerged, though. I'm pretty sure when we looked at him just a couple weeks ago in game time, there were only 2 negative personality traits, and it looks like there's 3 now. So wouldn't necessarily be the greatest influence in our clubhouse with that low leadership, loyalty, and work ethic, and very little hustle. So I think I may continue to just be patient. I don't think it's a huge need for us, and I certainly think that if we wanted to, as we got closer to the trade deadline, to trade for a guy like Jenkins or Ibekwe, they'd be out there for us. Does certainly seem that Ortega is generating some interest, though, so won't shock me if he's signed over the next few days before the winter meetings come to an end. And we'll see what type of hit the likely departures of Dora and Ortega have on our very strong fan interest. And we have made it to the end of the winter meeting, so I was wrong about Ortega potentially being gone. Both he and Ibekwe are still on the markets. Taking a look at the pitchers, Yun-Ho Kim still out there, along with Tudor, Dora, Mooney, Pilla, Saucedo. So a lot of big veteran pitchers on the market this year. Fortunately, we don't have to be chasing after them in that $25 to $30 million range that it seems like most of them would like to ultimately get signed in. And we made it to the Rule 5 draft. Still no movement on most of the big free agents we've been talking about, although the posted Korean player Yun-Ho Kim signed a big 5-year, $140 million deal with the Marlins organization. I don't anticipate us being particularly big players in the Rule 5 this year. We did just add 5 younger players in our organization who would have been eligible for the Rule 5 to the secondary roster to protect their rights. So we've really only got one spot available if we want to pick up people, and more importantly, as this franchise has gotten stronger over the last decade or so, we found ourselves needing to tap into Rule 5 for guys who can help us much less frequently over the past few years. The 5 players that we added to the secondary roster, left fielder Juan Ramirez, IAFA signing from 2036, split last year between high A ball and double A ball, and he was pretty incredible in double A, where he hit .354 with 19 homers and 164 at-bats, combined for 50 home runs at the 2 levels, but a ridiculous 210 WRC plus for him in double A last year. Big Thunder looks like a guy who could be knocking some home runs in the majors in the not too distant future. Also put young starting pitcher Jesus Ramos on the major league roster, or on the 40-man roster. He's the number 95 prospect. We talked about him earlier in the episode. Also added the potential two-way players Mike Homer, who made it up to AAA at the end of last year, former second-round pick in 2036, and Brett Carlisle, an 11th-round pick in that same draft, who's also a potential two-way player, only made it up to AA last year. Looks like he could be a pretty interesting hitting prospect. The pitching looks like he's just kind of a guy, even in the best-case scenario. But I think that both Homer and Carlisle were guys that we'd like to protect. And then the final player that we added onto the 40-man roster was the first baseman Damani Hainsbury, a 17th round pick in 2036. Think that the left-handed hitting first baseman could definitely hit a few home runs, combined for 23 dingers between A and high A last year. Almost considered leaving him off, but figured we'd protect him if somebody really wants him in a trade. We'd certainly be willing to include him. Don't think he's got a big future in our organization at 23 years old, having only made it to high A ball. But given that he does look like a left-handed bat who could have well above average home run power, didn't necessarily want anyone to be able to take him away from us for free, but he was certainly the final guy that we added to the 40-man roster, and also the one that we were most willing to potentially leave off the roster of the players that we talked about. And we ended up losing 5 players in the Rule 5 draft. 4 kind of youngerish kind of players, and then John Thomas, Arturo Estrada, who was in AAA for us a year ago, taken away from us. The Toronto organization, who we signed him from a year ago when he was a minor league free agent, has brought him back into the fold. And the calendar is flipped to 2041 finally. Ortega and Dora still looking for work, as is Kamani Ibekwe, and actually another guy we talked about in the trade market over the past few years, Frank Itsuris. Don't see ourselves chasing after any of those players, but certainly if they linger on the market long enough, there may be something interesting for us to do. I tend to think that Ortega and Dora will end up finding the kind of money that they're looking for at some point. Ibekwe and Itsuris, though, definitely are guys who I think could perhaps linger a bit longer. We've got only 2 weeks now until the IAFA signing period opens, so we'll find out what happens with the free agents over the next couple of weeks before we turn our attention to the new IAFA class. And unlike last year, we are going to have the full $5.7 million to spend this year. So definitely could have some interesting decisions that we need to make among some of the top prospects out there. And we've simmed ahead another week or so, getting close to the start of the IAFA signing period. Both Ibekwe and Ortega still out there. Ibekwe down to asking for 4 years at only $9 million a year. But honestly, given the evolution of that additional negative personality type and the fact that I don't think we really need him, I can't say we won't bring him on board, but I don't want to be paying him $9 million. Ortega actually is now only looking for 4 years as well, but his dollar amount at 38 plus is still way more than we would be willing to pay for him. But it is interesting that the franchise remains out there. And Mr. Dora remains out there as well. Maybe we're not going to end up getting compensatory picks between the first and second rounds for both of them. Dora still looking for 5 years, $27 million a year. So would love these guys, particularly Dora and Ortega, to sign contracts worth over 9 figures combined. but I don't think it's guaranteed that that will ultimately happen. And we have simmed ahead to the start of the IAFA signing period. No changes with the players that are free agents that we've been talking about. So still some options there, but at this point we're going to do what we often do at this time of year in the game and ask the worldwide scouting department for some help on which direction you might go in this upcoming IAFA period. As I noted, we've got as much money to spend as any team out there. We've been scouting 4 pitchers and 6 position players pretty aggressively. So those are the players that we'll talk about. Starting pitcher Alfredo Verdugo, looking for $3.6 million. So certainly looking to be paid well. But there's a lot to like about him. Good stamina, good at holding on runners, durable left-handed arm. Only a 3-pitch arsenal, so no guarantees that he's going to have the full arsenal you'd like to see out of a potential starter. But we think his stuff, movement, and control could all be well above average at the major league level. Wilson Rivera, 17-year-old righty, looking for a bit less at $2.8 million. Another guy whose potential third pitch is a little borderline, but still think his stuff, movement, and control could all be well above average. Clarindo Moreno, another 17-year-old, looking for $3.8 million, more than anyone else out there. Does have that high financial ambition. He's smart, not the greatest leader in the world. Really good stamina and outstanding at holding on runners. A potential 6-pitch arsenal if everything went well. I think his stuff could be world class, and movement and control both well above average for this left-hander with the nickname Red Eye. Last but not least, 16-year-old starter Louis Gamba, looking for $2.4 million, so the least among these 4 pitchers. Another lefty, potential 4-pitch arsenal, plenty of stamina, fine at holding on runners, throws in the low 90s. Like his high work ethic. Don't love that he's not the smartest fellow in the world, but still think his stuff could be outstanding with movement and control that could both be above average. Has a lot of work to do controlling his pitches and where they go at this point. But 4 pretty interesting to me starting pitchers, 3 of whom are southpaws for us to consider here in the 2041 IAFA period. And as I mentioned earlier, there's 6 position players that we have been scouting more aggressively at our camps. 4 of them are 5-star prospects, and then there's a couple of 4-star prospects that we preferred to at least learn more about compared to the others. One of them is shortstop Wilfredo Orozco, right-handed hitting 16-year-old. Think he could be a pretty solid fielder. High work ethic, low financial ambition, not great speed, but think he can be above average in just about everything at the plate. Luis Aguilar, a 16-year-old right-hander out of Venezuela. Think his contact, gap power, and home run power could all be above average. Pretty average eye, some positive personality traits, and looks like he could be a interesting left-handed hitting corner outfield bat for String Bean Aguilar down the line. Aguilar looking for only $1.5 million. Orozco looking for $2.2 million. The last 4 players we're going to talk about are the 4 5-star potential prospects in this draft. And again, with $5.7 million, if there's somebody that we really love, odds are we'll be able to get them. These guys are all requesting between the low 2s to $3 million. Cheapest of the group, asking for $2.2 million, is the shortstop Juan Bonilla, also known as Racehorse. Switch hitting shortstop. Really like the glove at this age. Really like the personality. Really like the speed. Potentially outstanding contact and very good gap power. The home run power in the eye are not exceptional, but dare I say, for those who have watched us over the years and watched our Buffalo Wings expansion team in OOTP 24, there are certainly some similarities between Racehorse Bonilla's profile and Deshaun Seifu, who was a big-time player for us in that playthrough. Looking for $2.8 million, right fielder Vasco Espargera, another switch hitter. I think he potentially has world-class home run power to go with a really good eye and really good gap power. Doesn't necessarily have the speed to exploit those line drives to the power alleys perfectly. I think he could be a pretty decent defensive player. The question with him is going to be the contact and avoiding the strikeouts, but certainly an interesting switch hitting prospect as well. And then the final two of the top prospects are both looking for $3 million. One is a catcher, Santiago Reinaga, fly. Average defensively and not a ton of speed, but could have a very impressive bat, particularly for a catcher. Outstanding potential home run power, and we think his eye, his gap power, and his ability to make contact could all be above average as well. And last but not least, second baseman Adalberto Bacias. Like the high work ethic, not a ton of speed and not as developed defensively as some of the other infielders we've talked about. Do like his durability, but the reason to bring Turf Bacias on board is for a bat that looks like it could be absolutely legendary if he completely developed. Potential for 80 contact with 75 home run power and a 65 eye. The gap power is only average, but given the lack of speed, that's probably the trait that you won't mind being only average. But he has an opportunity to be an incredible contact hitter, hit a ton of home runs, and also draw an above average number of walks. Does have high work ethic as well, a lot of work to go. Listed as a second baseman, honestly, with that 6'4" height and those ratings, think he could be a more than competent first baseman. Certainly with that bat, could also handle designated hitter. Don't know that he'd ever really develop to the point where I'd feel real confident playing him anywhere else on the field. But certainly if that bat fully develops, you would find a spot in the lineup at first base or DH for Mr. Bacias. So I'd say that first glance, probably Adalberto and Juan Bonilla are probably the two most interesting everyday prospects to me. But it's always very helpful to hear what the worldwide scouting department thinks on these issues. And next time around, we'll start factoring in that input that we'll hopefully receive, and also start making some decisions. Hasn't been the most eventful month and a half or so over the course of this episode, but I guess you could say we also hopefully haven't done anything stupid as we get ready to finish things up. Check in just briefly on the free agents. Ortega, looking for more money than the last time we talked to him. Still only 4 years, but looking for over $39 million a year at this point. Ibekwe, looking for 4 years at $9.4 million a year. I think that's exactly where he was before. Frankie Torres could be certainly a very interesting left-handed bat to have on the team as an infielder. A bit better against right-handed pitching, but he's 32 years old. He's wrecked physically, no speed at all at this point. And most importantly, we really like our infield, so probably not someone we would chase after. He is, however, only looking for a 1-year deal. And given that we've got money to spend right now, could make things interesting by bringing Izturis on board down the line. Pitching-wise, as you know, we've been following the market for Mr. Dora. He's probably the top pitcher that is still on the market, still looking for 5 years at over $27 million a year. So Dora and Ortega have had to be real patient, haven't necessarily found the right fit yet. We are still hanging in there at this point with the 100 fan interest, but certainly at some point when we lose Dora and Ortega, we'll likely take a little hit there. And we'll also likely need to put some more money into our draft budget because hopefully their departures will ultimately turn into some compensatory picks for us here in Oakland. So if you've got any thoughts on what you'd recommend in the IAFA pool, always very helpful to hear those from our loyal viewers and members of the Worldwide Scouting Department. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.